Welcome to CarTorque with Matty J. This is the first of our interview specials, where I interview people in car media and the car industry to find out more about the industry and how to get in and to get a better understanding of what they do. I interview in this episode Paul Maric, who's the senior road tester and automotive journalist for caradvice.com.au, to ask those questions as well as find some interesting stories from his time as an automotive journalist. So sit back and enjoy, because we go for an hour straight. There's no breaks in this particular episode. We also discuss some this or that at the start of this podcast. So we join the action right after the FPV and HSV debate, which is always a good one. Enjoy the podcast. Thanks.
The FPV, big fan of the cars, and certainly right up until the end. I remember driving a GTF, and that was sensational. That thing had so much torque, like it was great, and the noise. It had incredible supercharger whine. It was just really good. HSV, it wasn't until they did this last GTSR that they really got the right exhaust note and made it all happen. Because when the GTS first came out with the LSA, it was just, you had to stand on it. You'd be doing stupid speeds before it made noise. Whereas then they used some of the Holden engineering staff's bimodal exhaust calibrations, a device called the Bailey tip, which was developed by Holden, and the engine is just great. But favourite car of all time so far has been the W1. That has just been phenomenal. That LS9 combo with the Trofeo tyres was just like a masterpiece, and that thing was so fast that, you know, it's just wrong that a car that big can go so fast. Yeah. Like it was sensational. I'm very jealous of anyone that ended up with a W1.
Yeah, they're pitching over 200k now.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah. They've proper worked over, Shockworks, shocks.
Yeah.
I even love them. So
yeah, and you're a Ford man, I suspect. A
bit of a Ford guy. But don't get me wrong, I'd love a Maloo.
Yep.
Because I reckon they're just stupidly awesome.
Fun.
Yeah. But nah. I can see why people
the Maloo is a sensational thing. The thing for me with Ford just didn't have the money to keep that whole operation going, and we ended up. I was fortunate enough to join the Ford guys at the Falcon Sprint launch, so driving the 6 and the 8. Yep. Got a chance to interview the guys, and they were all so passionate, and they made the most of the short millions they had. They developed a tyre with Pirelli for the car. The Sprint 6 was bloody ridiculously good. I was just amazed at how quick those cars were. The brake package, everything was great about them. And I wasn't entirely convinced that HSV would do the LS9 and the W1, because the cost of engineering a new engine when you have 6 months worth of sales left is stupid. But they did it, so kudos to them.
Yeah, no, it's a special car, the W1. I think I was reading, I can't remember who it was, Motor or another magazine. I ran a lap. I can't remember which track it was quicker than an Nissan GTR.
Yeah,
which is just unbelievable for a 4-door sedan.
You know, it all came down to gearing as well. We had the chance to test it at Haunted Hills, which is a hill climb track in Maui, and what I found there was I didn't even have to. You could make it around that whole track without leaving first. The gear would run out to 96 kilometres an hour. So you could use second, but then you'd have to sort of crunch it back into first in a few corners. But it was phenomenal. It was just like a go-kart. It had just endless amounts of traction. And when you switched it all off, it was quite progressive, and the engine just had so much torque that you could just drive like an idiot, and it was still really good. Excellent car.
Apparently, from what I've heard, the chassis balance and that was just, they got it right, and everything about it was spot on.
Yeah, it was firm. I mean, we published a video at Car Advice where we drag raced the W1 against a BMW M3 competition, an AMG 63S and an Alfa Romeo Giulia QV, and it basically just bet all of them. Yeah. So that car is a testament to Australian engineering, I reckon. And
it's a manual too, so...
Yep, exactly.
Makes it more fun. WRX or Evo?
I
mean, it depends. Okay, we're talking the latest STI versus the previous gen, like Mitsubishi
definitely the Subaru, because the Evo 10 I think was the softest car they've ever made.
Okay.
And Evo. I don't know. The most enjoyable Evo that I drove was the 9. Yeah. That was amazing, and I continue to be impressed with the Subaru. The issue with the Subaru though is that it's the time has moved on. We did a comparison with Golf R and the Subaru STI Spec R, I think it was it R Spec, whatever they call it.
Yep.
And the Subaru it's just so far behind the times. Even doing 0 to 100 runs, you had to genuinely abuse the car to get what you needed. Didn't feel right. On gravel, the Golf R was great. The Subaru just it didn't feel as composed. But then I think Mitsubishi just screwed it all up by putting in the dual clutch for the Evo, and it just lost its appeal.
Yep.
But the 9 was like the last sort of proper fun Evo to drive.
Yeah, the fastest car I've been in was an Evo 9.
Yeah, right.
A modified one.
Yeah.
It scared the shit out of me.
Yeah, like
it was fast as hell.
The engines are tiny, and then it was a 2.4 litre. I think the Evo 9 got the 6-speed manual, and it's just like, this thing is bulletproof. You just cannot kill the bloody thing. Like, it is... It's amazing.
They're a strong engine. I think really the clutches they're a bit funny to drive.
Yeah.
But once you get used to them, they're obviously quite easy. But my mate's one just blew me away.
Yeah.
In any weather, pissing down rain, still just stick like glue, and it was like.
Yeah, the traction is ridiculous, and then having the this is testing my memory. What did they call it? Was it the Super Active Yaw Control?
Active Yaw Control,
yeah. Like that thing is amazing in terms of what you can do to customise it.
Yeah.
The one in the Subaru, which I find funny, the thing I don't understand is how people don't bother doing research on how their system works. So I've seen a number of publications where they think that the plus and the minus is for which direction drive is sent, whether it's the front or the rear axle. But it has to do with how much the differential is locking. So it depends on how much you want it locked or whether you want it automatic. And people play with that control thinking that it will make a difference with regards to how much torque it sends where. Which is a little bit funny. So the Subaru thing is quite technical, whereas the Mitsubishi one was fairly straightforward. You just set what you wanted and away you go.
This is a bit of a tricky one. Focus RS, Civic Type R or Golf R?
So we've actually just done a comparison. Unfortunately, I wasn't part of that, and I haven't driven the Type R yet. But I know that the Focus RS I just find incredibly fun to drive. Like, it is so different to what I thought it would be. I've driven the previous gen, the front wheel drive, and was amazed with how much communication you get through the chassis, but also the fact that it doesn't feel like a front wheel drive. You can turn it in, nail it, and you don't get any torque steer. Like they had a system called
Revo Knuckle.
Yeah, Revo Knuckle. That's it. And it was amazing. And this new one, it was a hard job to build on that. They built on it and then included things like the drift mode, and you can get it with a drift stick. Like, it is, the car is just sensational fun. It's unfortunately not quite a daily driver, which then leads me to the Golf R. And the Golf R is just stupid. Like, we've clocked a 4.6 second 0 to 100 in that with launch control, and it's so fast. You can drive it just normally. Now it's got the infotainment, the tech, the everything. So the Golf R, I don't know. It'll be a hard choice between Focus RS and Golf R. Once I drive the Type R, I'll see sort of how that places, but I've heard good things about that too.
Yeah. One of my brother's good mates has got a modified Golf R.
Yes.
Stupid.
Yeah, it doesn't take much to modify them. You just tune and bang, away you go. Yeah, I think they're really cool, and I think they look great as well. They're sort of not over the top and not underdone. They're just right.
They're just right.
Yeah, Focus RS has a fairly aggressive look to it. So
Civic Type R's overboard, I reckon.
Yeah, way overboard. And with the other issue with the Focus RS is the turning circle is horrendous. You cannot turn. It's just insane.
Yeah.
The Golf R is like a no compromise car. Yeah.
It's a car you can do every day.
Yeah, exactly.
M3 or C63?
So previously I would have said C63 because I love the noise. I just feel like it's an absolute weapon. But we're just about to publish a video where we did a launch control demonstration in the M3 and sort of answer the question whether you need launch control to achieve manufacturer times. As part of that, the thing that I genuinely disliked about the M3 was that every time you drive it, you're always hitting a limiter within the stability control. So it's always snapping and being aggressive. Yeah. And it really started to make sense to me when we had the chance to take it to what was effectively a skid pan and switch everything off. And then that car is so progressive and sharp that it's really made to be driven not by just an amateur. If you're an actual race driver and are confident driving with everything off on a track, you can get the most out of that car and it will blitz a C63. Wow. Whereas the C63 is built for the person who wants a daily driver that they can show off in and look tough, whereas the M3, it's a very different beast. It sounds, I think, incredible, but it's just a little too sharp for the road. Yeah. But obviously you put it in the right hands, it's fine. So, it's striking that balance, and I think the M3 for the genuine enthusiast is the car to go, whereas the C63 is the one if you want to make noise and be known that you're driving an AMG.
AMG, yeah.
Yeah, but that brings me to the point that the C43 I don't think is a real AMG. Like, those cars, they're just diluting the AMG brand, making them all-wheel drive.
They don't have They don't have the hand-built engine, do they? The C43.
No,
yeah.
So that moves them further away from the concept of AMG being an exclusive thing. Now you can just buy it, and I just don't think it's the same.
No, I've seen your review on Stinger versus SSV Red Line,
Yep.
so I won't go there. Group B or Group A? So I was going back a while before my time, but I still watch and see the cars, and they're just they're nuts. The people that drive especially Group B cars. So
I don't know. I'm a fan of Group B, and I'm the same. Like, when I look at the way that these people used to drive, you look at some of the tracks and some of the environments that they were left to deal with. I don't know how a modern day race driver would go being put into that position. I feel like they were better drivers, compared to today. And I don't know. It's an interesting question. I think that racing has changed so much since the days of older cars, and especially when older cars were having to be driven at the limits, and it was genuinely dangerous. Now they're going faster, but I feel that with risk you get the reward, and also nowadays that if you're driving as fast as you are, you look at something like your Fiat Supercar series, there's so much protection within that vehicle that unless, like that incident that happened, I can't remember when it was, end of Conrod Straight, when they had the guy die.
Yeah.
They're quite safe. Whereas if you go back to the days of traditional AV racing, it was just very much a case of the better driver is the winner here.
Yeah.
No,
that's a good answer. Mountain pass or straight line?
That's a good question. For me, a mountain pass is great if I know that I'm not going to encounter a cyclist or a motorbike coming the other way. If I can have the whole road to myself, a mountain pass. Straight line, I know that it's me in charge and I know what's happening, but mountain pass is the ultimate way to have a bad crash if someone's doing something bad. Yep. So you can be on your best behaviour, but things can go wrong. If I am going out for a drive, it will generally be like early in the morning. It will be when I know there's no one else around. I have to be respectable to cyclists, because a lot of people get irritated with cyclists, but they have to understand that when you are on a bicycle, that it can be scary having a car fly up behind you. But equally, if you're cycling on a mountain pass that has a 100 km/h speed limit, it's just a dangerous place to be. I've had experiences before where motorcycles have been coming around a corner. I've had like someone's head in my lane as they've got so much angle, and it's stuff like that it's not worth losing your life over a joyride. So for me it's a mountain pass, but it just depends on the conditions. And for straight line, I don't get much thrill out of using launch control and seeing how fast a car is. We do it for benchmarking, but for me, if I can have a manual gearbox and it's up to the driver to then achieve a quick time, I'm all for that.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like the Typhoon's not the most sharpest thing that I drive, but I'll get up like really, really early, head up to like the spur or something, and go for a drive. And it's being a manual, you can monitor through the gears, and it's,
exactly.
It's the best feeling. All my mates are like, "Oh, why don't you get more power out of it and go straight?" I'm like, no, it's just putting it through a corner. It's more visceral. You feel it.
That's the thing I don't get. Like, more power, yes, is more power, but if you can't use it, what's the point? Like, more power really affects straight line, or if you're on a racetrack or something, and if you're not, just drive a car that you're happy with. There's no point.
Yeah, I've had that. Like, my daily drive is an old Laser. But I can chuck it into corners and whatever. And everyone's like, "Oh, it's got no power." I'm like, "Yeah, but I have more fun than this because I'm like on it all the time, running corners." And they're like, "Oh, how can you say that over a Typhoon?" I think it's a whole mentality kind of shift. Yeah. So you have to really appreciate things for what they are.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So what about cars attracts you to them?
Just in general?
In general, yeah.
I don't know. For me, I've always had a fascination with new cars, and for me, I don't have to be driving something fast to be enjoying it. I love innovation. I love seeing autonomy and us advancing towards an autonomous future. It gives the chance for people who can't be bothered driving and out, because at the moment they're on the roads making life hard for everyone. And I think that you need to give them a chance to go. Like, my wife doesn't like driving. She hates putting fuel in her car, all that sort of stuff. If she can just get behind the wheel of a car and not have to do anything, she'll be happy. It's one less person on the road holding everyone up. I like that. We're moving to a day where cars can become faster due to electric, but I also still want to have the ability to drive the car. I think we're going to lament the day the manual gearbox is gone. We're seeing less and less of that now. You can see all the supercars, they've all dropped manuals. Really need to go lower in the range now, ironically, to find one with a manual. So for me, it's just seeing how new cars evolve and looking at how they were and how they are today. It's a job that I really enjoy. I don't know that I could settle for one car. I enjoy being able to sample everything.
Yeah. I'm much in agreement to that because before I bought the Typhoon, I wasn't going to buy one.
Yep.
I'm a hot hatch guy. I love things that go around corners.
Yep.
And I was just like, screw it. I'll just give it a crack and just jump into it. So everyone's like, the engine's really, really good.
Yeah.
Like, we'll see, and it's just having that point of everything's different, and going out of your comfort zone and seeing what's different.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Yeah, completely agree.
As an engineer, how did you end up in this profession?
So it's a bit of a long story, but what I did was, so I was originally, when I was a kid, I was into IT, so I was into computers and cars, and I finished high school and started working at a school in IT doing computer support type thing. I did that for a year before I started at uni, and in uni I started doing a telecoms degree. I got really sick of that after 6 months, and I switched to a mechanical engineering degree with the ambition of perhaps joining a car company to do chassis engineering or something like that. And it was around that time I started a website, a car website, maybe 12 years ago. Dad used to work for Ford, so he would bring home cars every now and then, so I'd review them for the site. When I turned 18, I started asking for cars from manufacturers. That all started sort of coming together. I got a freelance gig doing some stuff for a newspaper. My website was growing sort of pretty fast, and I got to the point where I couldn't really justify still running it while working, and I needed to then bring people on, and that was when I met Albors, who started Car Advice. So Car Advice was about 6 months old at that point, and we hit it off. I was doing stuff for him, and then the discussion came up about selling my site to Car Advice. So Car Advice bought my site for a shareholding in Car Advice. So I continued through uni doing mechanical engineering. It was about a 5-year degree in total. By the end of that, I had the choice of either joining Car Advice sort of full time or continuing with my professional thing, and I stupidly went to professional life. So I continued this whole time doing sort of freelance journalism. I worked as an engineer for 3 years full time. Got sick of that and was offered a position at Car Advice about 3 years ago. So I've been here full time for 3 years. The engineering thing helps me in the sense that most of my colleagues are journalists, and it gives me a point of difference to have an engineering degree, because when people talk about stuff on a car, I'll actually know what they're talking about, as opposed to the journalist who's just writing it down. I'll actually have an understanding. I'm able to talk to other engineers at car companies to get a better feel for how something works, so I can explain it to someone else. So that's how it sort of helps me in this field, and I think it's a great asset to have. And my recommendation is for anyone looking to get into this type of thing to offer a point of difference, because you can't. I just don't understand why people think that all you need is a journalism degree. You've got to have an actual understanding. If you want to relay how a car works, a journalism degree doesn't give you that. It shows you how to write, but if you can write and string words together, well, what else more do you need?
Yeah. Cool. What are some of the challenges you face in your career as a journo?
That's a good question. I originally, when I first started, so the first ever car launch I went to, so a car launch, is effectively where a manufacturer will get, let's say it's this Honda Civic here, they'll get 10 different variants together, and they'll invite all these journalists from wherever. You'll get to drive the car, interview people, and off you go. So the first one that I went to, and this would have been about 11 years ago, the first car launch was for Volvo XC90, and I was the youngest person there. I would have been about 19, 20 at the time. youngest person there by at least 40 years. Everyone was ancient, and I felt quite uncomfortable because they're all old. I've got nothing to talk to them about. I don't really know how all this stuff works. So I found that was a bit tricky because I cared too much about what people thought. These days, if I go to a car launch, I mean, this is going to sound bad, but I just don't really care what the others are doing. And if the others are off, talking about MGs or something like that, because they're old people, I just don't really care that I'm not part of that conversation. I'll just go do my own thing. And the biggest challenge has been getting car companies to understand online. Online is a new thing for them, and still is in many ways, and that's taken a long time to evolve. So we are getting to the stage now where they appreciate that, but it's taken a while, and I think that's been a big challenge, just sort of making yourself an authority despite not having the age of some of your peers, I guess.
What would you recommend for people like me who are wanting to get into this industry? Obviously, you mentioned point of difference.
Yep.
And I've been big, I really agree with that point. What else besides like finding that niche or finding that point of difference do you reckon would make it be able to help you make it in this industry?
You know what? A lot of people, we get a lot of people emailing, and I get a lot of people contacting me about getting into the industry, and everyone seems to think that I'll come to work, or the rest of my colleagues will come to work, hop in some McLaren and go for a drive somewhere, come back, go home, and that's it. No, it doesn't work like that at all. Like, looking at this garage that's behind us now, we've got a Honda Civic, an M140, a Hilux, something else, and there's just some generic cars here, and that's life most of the time. You've got to be able to appreciate all new cars as opposed to just the fancy stuff that everyone likes talking about. I can't stand people who are in this industry to showboat, because no one cares. You're replaceable. So thinking that you're better than you are is one thing to not bother doing. So you've got to have a genuine love for cars. You've got to be willing to work from the ground up. Like, the amount of people that start off in the industry and again expect immediately to be out doing something fun, it's like it does not work that way. So we've got some interns that have interned for a year, joined, and it'll be 2 years before they even drive something half interesting. And the reason behind that is that when a manufacturer gives us a car, they're giving us a car, and it's the responsibility of that car. So when they give us something, it's not like we can go and just burn tyres and do all this shit with it. You've got to respect the car and respect that you are driving someone else's property. And the second I see that someone isn't respecting that, I'll call that out and remind them of the fact that that's not your car. In fact, most journalists, because of the amount they get paid, could not afford most cars, let alone the exotic stuff. So the advice would be, get yourself a point of difference, be prepared to work hard, be prepared to start from the ground up, and I guess be prepared to be multi-platform. That's another thing that these days is huge. Like, you can't come into this industry wanting to just work for a magazine and just be happy with that. Nowadays, you've got to be able to present on video. You've got to be able to talk about a car confidently on radio. You've got to be able to write about it, photograph it. You've got to be able to communicate effectively with PR people, engineers. The key is to not look like an idiot at any point, because if you're entrusted as an authority on new cars, you need to look like you know what you're talking about. So, yeah. Bit of a long-winded answer, but yeah.
No, confidence, willing to put in the extra mile. And,
exactly.
And you got to remember, most of the cars you guys test are for everyday people.
That's it. I mean, best-selling car in Australia is the Hilux, not the Lambo Aventador. So that's why that car takes precedent over any other for content. So, that's as simple as it is. People want to read about that. Yeah. You might get a small selection. And the thing is, the guy that buys an Aventador doesn't read car advice. Or he might, but he doesn't give a shit what I think about it. He'll just go buy it anyway. Yeah, so you have to understand that no one cares what you think. They look to you as an expert for an opinion, just like anyone else that researches a new product. But if you think that someone cares beyond what your opinion is, it's just wrong. I know, and the example of that is like anyone who tries to be a try-hard Top Gear. These guys have worked up to the level that they're at with an engaged audience for quite some time. Anyone that tries to copy that is wasting their time, and they look stupid. So it's a case about just being genuine and understanding that it's not about you, It's about the car.
Yeah. With the internet the way it is now, we see so many automotive journalists taking interesting concepts to review cars. Matt Farah from Swing and Tyre is a good example with when he does one takes. I don't know if you've seen them.
Yep.
Now he's obviously not doing them much more anymore because other people have taken that idea and went with it. What do you think is kind of like the next big concept for automotive journalists to delve into?
Well, funny you should bring this up. The next big thing is influencers and YouTubers. So we've invited a guy over who's upstairs right now. His name is Joe Achilles, and he's a bloke that has this cult following, and he reviews BMWs. And he started off doing just the occasional thing, now has big following on YouTube, Instagram, blah, blah, blah. And this guy is now at a level where he's being invited to events to look at stuff, and he's looking to make this a career. You look at Shmee, the dude in the UK. So him and Joe are good friends, and these guys are looking at the game of not so much becoming sort of heading towards an age where anyone can review a car. And what happens is that they almost have more authority than the experts because, like with Matt Farah, when you see him and you get to know him, you get to be comfortable with what he's saying, you trust him, and you're willing to sit through a one take, which is generally not as well produced, goes for longer, blah, blah, blah. If we were to do that, and you stumbled across us and didn't know us from a bar, so had never seen any of our content, you'd click away because you're like, this is boring.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's someone that you know and engage with and you have a following, they're comfortable with you experimenting and doing stuff. So I think that is where we're heading now, where you've got these established companies like Car Advice that do reviews, but we're moving down the path of influencers having more of a say, more of an opinion, and car manufacturers value them a bit more because they're less likely to say bad things. And even if they do say bad things, it's not like it's a critical bad thing. It's just like it's a bad thing that your friend says about something, but everything else he says has been good, so you sort of ignore it. So yeah, I think that's where sort of things are heading at the moment. So I think it's a good thing. Why not? People need to. There's even another one called Supercar Blondie. So she's a lady from Australia, lives in Dubai. Husband probably has a lot of money or something. I don't know what she does outside of that. But after an article she had written on her, I think in the Daily Mail, her following has exploded and she's had lots of opportunities now. So it's that type of thing that helps. Obviously she's got a point of difference there, but yeah.
Cool. So at Car Advice, what is the process of a review from start to finish? Is there planned shooting, story / plan, or is it just at times spontaneous? I know it's a bit of a long-winded question, but
that's all right.
What would be a standard procedure?
Yeah, I'm laughing here because there's not often a rinse and repeat procedure.
Yeah.
Now, it's not because we're disorganised, it's because every car is different. So I'll give you an example of one that we had just recently. So we did a comparison with Honda Civic, this one's the VTIL, Hyundai i30 SR, Holden Astra RS, and Mazda 3. Because with a comparison like that, if we do it on the road, there's limitations to what we can do. So if I want to test the handling of a car, I can't really do it on a public road. If I want to performance test them, can't really do it on a public road. It's not because performance testing is important for a car like this, it's because you want to benchmark it against the other three cars.
Yep.
So for that one in particular, I'll walk you through the process for it. So we know that we're getting the cars, we know when the cars are coming in, we need to collect the cars, so there's someone involved in that. This particular comparison that we did that hasn't been published yet was 4 cars. We needed a video on it. So for that one in particular, I need a video person, I need a photographer, and because it's 4 cars, we need a second video person. So we then need to find a venue. So we now use the AARC, which is the Australian Automotive Research Centre. It's the proving ground in Anglesey, owned by Lindsay Fox. And what I need to do is then justify my time out of the office for a day and what else we can do to make value out of it. So what we did was we booked the AARC for 2 days. 2 days for the guys to film the cars and for me to present and to evaluate the cars and do the testing I need to do. We then decided that on the second day we would also do some other content. So this was the Kia Stinger and the BMW M3 at the same place. Getting the cars there is obviously a problem because you have 6 cars, so we used a truck to transport 3 cars down there. 1 car was driven by Holden down to the place. I knew that we'd be going through a set of tyres on the M3 and potentially the Stinger, so we bought new tyres for the Stinger, which are over there. We had the new tyres fitted to the car. I let BMW know that we'd be potentially going through a set of tyres in the M3. So for them, it's not so much it's a problem, it's so that they know when the car comes back it needs to have new tyres, as opposed to the car comes back and, oh my God, it needs new tyres, I don't have any. So that's that process. When we're there, we're doing, day one was the guys out getting B-roll shots, so that's basically where the video guys are out with the cars at this facility, getting shots of them passing. There's shots where you can't see the driver, so in video land, when you see the car passing, it's just a car passing. You don't focus on who the driver is. The driver is generally someone else. So I'll be there for the bits that need me to speak or to do other things. While the guys are getting B-roll, I'm getting performance data, so using a V-Box. That's a GPS device that measures performance. For cars like this, I'll get 0 to 100, 100 to 0. We'll do 0 to 100 3 times and I'll take the best time. 100 to 0, we'll do that 3 times and I'll take the best time. The reason we do that 3 times is you get brake fade. Yep. We had one incident with the Mercedes-Benz GLE Coupe where it started getting brake fade after the second brake attempt from 100, and we published that. Mercedes-Benz cracked it because they thought it was an unrealistic test, but I disagreed. Had cross-drilled brakes, obviously, to help it with braking performance, and it didn't help. So we talked about that because the cars we tested it against at the time didn't do that after 3 stops. So it gives us a sign of how good the brakes are. I'll do a cornering G test. So what we do with that, the V-Box again can measure Gs. We have a big sort of skid pan area at the AARC where there's like a 15 metre radius circle with a white line. I'll drive the car around, gradually increasing throttle to the point where it starts understeering. We'll then, that's right, we'll then measure the maximum G-force that we can get, because what happens is once the car starts understeering, you're breaching the friction limit and then you're not actually adding any more Gs because the car's starting to push weight. So that test tells us which chassis is better suited with the car, which tyres are better, blah, blah, blah. I'll do a decibel test there as well. So across that whole circuit, we'll run like a decibel meter to see the maximum peak in the car. That'll tell us how noisy the cabin is. Do that at 80 and 100 kilometres an hour. And then the final test I'll do as well is a fuel economy run, which is several laps of what they call the ADR circuit at the facility at 80 and 100 k's an hour, and that will give me a fuel measure. We'll then generally get real-world fuel consumption as well, but because we share the car with so many people here at the office, it's a bit unrealistic to do that. So it's better to have a closed environment where I can just rinse and repeat. So that is a general idea of how we would do a comparison like that, where we've got 4 cars involved. Obviously, a performance car is a little different. You've got a track that will hire or something like that, but that's the general midst of a bigger test. Yeah.
For a person like me who's trying with his little car show and is beginning to write reviews, I'm on social media, really trying to push my show, but still can't seem to really break out. What would I be able, what could I do better, or what would you recommend for me to be able to get noticed?
Yep.
I mean, obviously the point of difference as previously mentioned.
Yep.
But even just in general, things to look for when conducting a test, or just general talk.
So the thing is that you've got to. So I mentioned before, getting the opportunity to interview other podcasters so that they can perhaps interview you or talk about your show. That obviously helps getting exposure.
It's a plug.
Unfortunately, the hardest thing is because everyone has a podcast, right? You've got to have a point of difference, and it's one of the things that you can't just go out and find a point of difference. It has to be something that you come up with. For podcasting, I know that it has to be regular, so it has to be published the same time every week or every month or whenever, because if it's not, people lose interest. And if we're ever late, you need to make up for it. So it always has to be regular and consistent. You need to take feedback, so you need to ask for feedback, take feedback to know that people are listening and they care. You know, ask them to leave ratings so they can push up the quality of the show. And exclusives. If you can offer something exclusive on the show that will force people to listen in, that's, that helps. And just interviews. I mean, interviews are another good thing. We do a lot of interviews with the Car Advice podcast, just as people that are interesting. Take, for example, if you can get an interview with Lindsay Fox, for example, just having a chat to him about his cars. People find that stuff interesting. So, and often the hardest thing is you may think your show is great or whatever you're doing is great, but and I've fallen into this trap many times where you don't get a third-party perspective, and because your judgment is always clouded. So what I would do is get someone who's perhaps a little bit into cars but has never listened to the show to listen to it and give you feedback, because then you'll pick up things that you may not have noticed. And I guess the final tip as well is to make sure the production quality is good. That's a hard thing to do, but if the production quality is good, they will have no excuse to switch off, because it'll mean that they'll sit through the whole thing without sort of wanting to turn off.
Yep. I've actually got in contact with Mighty Car Mods. Well, they got in contact with me because I spoke about them on the show, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we'll listen to the show. We'd love to come on or have a chat." So
that would be a very good idea, because what you can do from there is once you get them on to have a chat, get them to tell their followers about it. So if they tweet or in one of their videos just say, "Oh, by the way, we had a chat on this podcast. Have a listen to what we had to say," that then gets their followers, because they trust them, to then come to you and have a listen. And in that episode, that's the one you want to pump up. Things like, make sure you leave us a rating, blah, 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 because then you're going to get a new batch of listeners. Yep. You want to optimise as well. So you want to see what length of show works. Is it too long? Is it too short? That's how you do, you get that through your feedback. So if each week you ask a different question of your listeners to give you feedback on it, that will then help you understand your market better.
Now, you've driven some incredible cars. What would be the most incredible car / moment you've had while doing this job?
So, incredible car, probably... So, I'll name two of them. One was I had the chance to drive a Veyron, and that was when I was 19. I was the youngest person in the world at the time to have driven the car. And that was an incredible experience, because I was pretty sure I wasn't going to be allowed to drive the car because I was 19. But when we did the factory tour, we went out for a drive just as a bigger group. They had a chaperone with the car. Came back to the factory, and who was in the car? I think it was Anthony Crawford from Car Advice. He goes, "Mate, get in, it's your turn." And I thought, I'm not going to ask any questions about forms. Oh shit, I'm just going to get in and do this. I got in and I was terrified, because the guy that was in the car was the chaperone from Bugatti. He was an okay guy, but just not very friendly. Spoke in French to someone the entire time on the phone, And when we got onto the freeway, I said to him, "Do you mind if I give it a stab?" And he goes, "Well, it's your license." So, and I'm like, "Of course I'm going to do this." So I just went full throttle, doing maybe 80 k's an hour at the time. Hit the throttle, and I remember the surge of torque, the traction control light came on because it lost traction at 80 k's an hour. And then we propelled up to 260, 270. It was hammering. And now I remember rolling out of the throttle, and just a minute later looking in my mirror, because I was in the overtaking lane, and there was a police car there. And I thought, fuck, I'm screwed here. Just thinking to every time I've been on the road in Victoria. And I was getting prepared to sort of have to, I don't know what was going to happen. So I merged out of the way, and the cop car was a Fiat 500 or a Fiat Punto. He came up next to me, gave me a thumbs up, and drove off. And I'm like, fucking hell, I dodged a bullet there. So that was amazing. And the other one was getting the chance. It was the Jaguar F-Type SVR launch, and the track that we were at was in Spain. It was Motorland Aragon, where they do, I think, MotoGP. And when they have the track configured with the back straight fully open, Jag's call to fame with this car was that it'll do 300 k's an hour. So they set up the track for us to do 300. So I rolled onto the back, full throttle, and just having the surreal moment when you hit 300 to realise that you're doing this, getting paid for this, and that was great. And then it all became unstuck when I hit the fucking brakes as hard as I could. The guy, because it was a second lap, the instructor said to me, "Just brake a little later this time." And these carbon ceramic brakes on these cars were shit ass. They just weren't stopping the car. and I was flat to the board. I said, mate, it is not stopping. I was gearing down, trying to slow it down, and we overshot the this sort of hairpin at the back of that. There was shitloads of room for runoff, but I remember thinking this is not going to end well. So the brakes were cooked by that point. But they're poor quality, but I don't know what the story was. But those two were great. And just a pinch yourself moment was when we went over to, I think it was Portugal this time, for Jaguar XJ 500, which is the new version of the XJ. I was sitting at the dinner table with, and sitting next to me was Ian Cullen, the head of design at Jaguar, and he is the nicest guy you will ever meet. And just that surreal feeling of thinking, I'm sitting here next to a guy that's designed some of the most amazing looking cars in the world. This just feels incredible. And also part of the surrealness of it was that the guy from Top Gear was at our table as well. What's his name? Rory Reid, one of the presenters, who was just the biggest anticlimax in the world. Just didn't want to talk to anyone. I was like, don't care. Yeah, so he wasn't that good, but Ian was amazing. So, and Ian, just down to earth guy. He told me a funny story where he used to work for, I think it was Walkinshaw, I think it was, and he designed the VT Club Sport, but he designed it on a plane on the way from the UK to Melbourne. Presented it to the guys, hopped on the plane, and went back. So the VT Club Sport is his baby. He used to live here in South Melbourne. All right. Yeah, just an amazing guy, has time for everyone, remembers your name, and it's like, this is a guy that doesn't need to remember my name. So, yeah, just very cool moments in life.
That one of those starstruck moments you
get. Yeah, exactly.
Meeting a hero. What's your take on the rise of the SUV? And do you think they offer a false sense of security? Because they're everywhere, and to be honest, like being in lowered cars when trying to pass, you can't never see anything, and like I ask people who own SUVs, and I'm like, why? They're like, because it's just easy to put the kids in and stuff like that. I'm like, I get that, but
Yeah, I don't know. My wife drives a Mazda 2, and she does nannying for this family, and the family well off or whatever, they've got a Range Rover Sport, and when she drives that, she says she loves the feeling of it. And I asked her why, and she goes, you sit higher, you see better, all this sort of stuff. But in actual fact, her Mazda 2 has better visibility than the Range Rover because it actually has windows, not just like the narrow things.
Squares,
yeah. So I look, the rise of the SUV is a surprise for Australia, because it's surprising that they have gone so well, but it's more surprising that people are conned by them. Like, maybe not conned, but I think of cars like a CX-3. You can pay $30-something thousand for a CX-3. It is literally a Mazda 2.
Jacked up.
Yeah, it has it's ineffective as an SUV. But people buy them, and I don't understand why. For me, I'm a wagon man. Audi RS6 is my dream car. Yeah. That seems to me the ultimate car, because you have a massive boot, shitloads of room inside, it hammers. Why would I need an SUV? It's heavier, and now the irony of it is that they're making like plug-in hybrid SUVs. It's like, this is stupid. It's too heavy to start with. I need all that stuff. So look, I understand the practicality of them. The bigger issue for me is people who drive something like a Prado around the city. They think that they don't have another option, but in reality, you've got like Honda Odyssey, Kia Carnival, big cars that seat lots of kids, bigger boots than your SUVs when the 7 seats are up. So I think it's the lure of thinking that one day you'll need to go off-road somewhere, which 99% of people don't.
And I think that's I agree with that. I think that's the car companies trying to sell you a lifestyle.
Dream. Yeah, that's all it is. Car companies are just brands. Yeah. They're just selling you the dream of what if I want to,
Yeah. I remember my dad back in 2006 bought a brand new Territory.
Yep.
He bought a Territory Gear, and he's like, I wanted something decent, like not that she can handle like a car, was like a boat. And I tried to convince him not to. It's been a good guy, still got it.
Yep.
But it's just like from that moment, it's just like I could see like it's like a mind shift change.
Yeah.
And people are like, oh yeah, SUV's great. Eco sports and stuff. They're never gonna go off road.
Yeah.
And
I don't know. It seems once they started an SUV, they don't go back.
Yeah.
And it must be the lure of sitting high. That's weird.
Yeah.
Very weird.
Do you think that with your automotive manufacturing industry in Australia essentially dead, There is a chance for young designers to still get work at companies like Holden and Ford. I know Ford is still offering they offer a graduate program and a few other things. But in 10 years' time, do you reckon they're still going to keep it? Because I know from my research that Ford Australia is still doing for Australasia.
Yep.
But theoretically speaking, with the industry here done, do you reckon there's still that chance?
No, I think that's the misconception. So Ford has hired an incredible amount of engineers, for example, designers. Yu Yang's has never been busier than it is. They are like they are doing such a good job for what they are. Holden, I had the chance to have a chat with Richard Filazzo, who's the boss of Holden Design, essentially, and that followed on with a chat that I had with Mike Simcoe, who started off in Australia and is now the head of GM Design globally. So Simcoe was responsible for cars like the Monaro. He was a champion of all these great things. So they still employ people here. So at Port Melbourne, there's designers there, clay modelers there that are designing cars for the rest of the world. And you've got some of them, like I think it was the Buick, I can't remember the name of it. It was designed entirely in Australia, and that thing looks stunning. Chev Bolt, Australian design. So, it's still alive and well. Anyone that is an engineer or a designer that wants to still be in the industry, the Australian manufacturing scene is gone, but the Australian engineering and design scene is still kicking on very strongly. And they'll happily take interns to give you experience, which can then be a stepping stone to overseas markets. Australians are very highly respected around the world for engineering and also design. So that's the thing I like the most about it.
Yeah, no. In your eyes, what makes something like back on topic of articles, because I added these in. What makes an intriguing article to read? Or because I know it's a lot more video based, and that's where everything's heading. But if you're looking at something to read and you say, okay, I want to have something technical, or
that's a really good question, because to me, maybe it's because I don't come from a journalism background, but I don't try and tell some crafty story with movie references and all this sort of stuff. I prefer to just get down to the point and give the person what they want.
Yeah.
So as a result of that, some people may not enjoy reading my stuff because it's just clinical and down to the line. So what I try and do is put it into perspective for a buyer. So let's say we're talking about, what's a good example? Jeep Compass, just recently I did the launch of that. What you'll find is that some people who are creative writers will gloss over things that are important. So they might not understand how the all-wheel drive system works, so they'll just gloss over it. They might spit out some figures about the approach and departure angle or the ground clearance and not really explain what that means. So if you're a buyer of a Jeep Compass and I tell you that it has a 30-degree approach angle, you want to know what that means. Is that good or is that bad? So I like to explain what that means. So for me, when I read an article, I want to know, I love just seeing the facts and the figures so that I know, what is the heart of this car. I don't really care so much about this fancy story. I prefer to just get to the point. But I understand, obviously, some people like reading something that takes them on a journey. If there's a story to tell, I'm happy to read it. So if it's a story about, you're interviewing someone interesting and they tell you a bit about their life, that I love. But yeah, if it's just someone's way of trying to make their story prettier, I just don't care. And it's the same with videos of car reviews. I just sometimes don't really give a crap what some people try and put on a performance. It's like, just tell me about the car, I don't care about you. So for someone like Chris Harris, for example, I don't find him engaging, but I love the way he drives a car and extracts every last bit of performance out of it. That to me is the ultimate car review, because I see it being just, he's beating the shit out of these cars, but driving them beautifully. So that's what I love seeing. I don't care when someone goes and does some lifestyle review of something, because it just doesn't interest me, because I have not learnt a thing. I haven't seen the car being driven dynamically. I just don't care. So that's why I try especially with my reviews, I try and keep them to the target market. So if we're reviewing something fun, I want the review to be exactly what that is. So if it's the M140, for example, I'm not going to do a video review of that where we drive around the city all day. I want to have at least one shot of it doing a launch control, at least one shot of it doing something sporty, so that you can get some value out of the review. And if you want to buy one, you know that you've learned something. and I've helped you make your decision. Yeah.
And I mean, if I always say if it's like a sports car or sports orientated, you want to see it doing sporty things.
That's right. And we're limited in Australia because we unfortunately can't do a lot of these things. Public roads, nanny state big time. We get complaints from people if a car touches like a solid white line in a video. It's like, are you people serious? So unfortunately, that means we're restricted to what we can do. Tracks are very expensive to hire, so I can't just go hire a track for something because there's no return on investment. While some people may enjoy watching it, the review, we can't justify the cost of that because it's, you know, if it was a Toyota Hilux that had a race package on it, fair enough, because I know that a lot of people buy them, you get value out of it. But if it's some bespoke car that no one really buys, there'd have to be a good reason for us to sort of try and do something extended with it. So that's why I try and limit video stuff to things that you can actually display doing the thing that's meant to be doing. Yeah.
Last question, what do you actually personally drive? Being a journo, has this made you more critical of the cars you've owned or drive? Do you prefer to talk about what you drive, or do you give recommendations upon what you've driven?
Yeah, that's a good question. Unfortunately, I have, this is sort of explaining my life story, but we live in an apartment. I have 3 parking spaces. One is for a press car that I'll take home. One is for my wife's car. She drives a Mazda 2. And one is a spare if someone wants to come and stay with us. I don't have any room to put a car. So I want to have my own car, but the problem is I can't just have one. I want to have like 5 or 6. So yeah, for me, if I could buy what I wanted, I would have an Audi RS6 because that represents the ultimate performance car. I think that is just amazing. It looks good, it sounds good, it does everything good. I would have a Range Rover Sport SVR because that car ticks the wife's boxes. It sounds stupidly good, and I just love everything about it. In terms of an older car, I want to have a DeLorean because I love Back to the Future in the series. I love that car and how special it is. I've heard they're restarting production with some of the original parts, which is cool.
In the States?
Yeah. I'd love to one day own an Australian car. If I can get my hands on a W1, I'd love to have that. In terms of exotics, I'm a stupidly big fan of the SLS AMG Black Edition. I would love to have one of those. There's such a long bloody list of cars that I want to own, and that's the problem. I would have to have unlimited money, and I don't know that in this job I could own one car and be happy with it. Yeah. I know it's not a good answer, but
it's a perfectly great answer.
Yeah, and the thing I hate the most, actually, ironically, is motoring journalists that don't own cars. And for me, it's not because I just want to live a free life of free cars. It's because the cars I want I can't afford, and one day. Yeah, one day.
My partner cracks the shits at me all the time. She's like, "You got bloody 3 cars." I've got one in Club Reg.
Yeah,
it's an old W124 Mercedes.
Yes, nice.
Which I'm fixing up.
Yep.
Gradually. I've got the Typhoon.
Yep.
And I've got the Laser. She's like, "You're paying all this shit. What for?" I'm like, all right, one's on Club Reg.
Yeah, so that's nothing.
And I'm like to her, well, next one's going to be an RS. She's like, "You're not having an RS." And
yeah, so, unfortunately. Some people just don't understand. I'm not going to say women. Some people don't understand. And I think I would prefer to have it that way. My wife doesn't like cars at all, so she doesn't care. I prefer to have that than a wife that loves cars, and then we both end up spending all of our money on shit we don't need. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. It's hard. We all have things we'd love to have, but can't afford to have. So I just make do with getting access to all these different cars and sort of making that happen. So
it's like, you have to pay for insurance.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's not like it's not like I do it just for that. That's just a benefit of the job. I'd love to be able to have a car that I love and cherish and work on. It's just, it'd end up being a money pit.
I'm finding that out the hard way. It's good to have a hobby, and I'm finding with my old Merc, it's good when it works.
Yeah.
But when it doesn't, it's
savage.
Savage, yeah.
I think that's part of the fun.
Oh yeah, I love it.
Got to make the most of it.
Yeah. So gives me stuff to talk about on my show.
Yeah, exactly.
And just to talk shit for an hour on a Tuesday night.
Oh, that's good. So how often are you recording it?
Every week.
Every week? And you've been consistent with all your recording?
Yep, every week. Uploaded usually on the Friday of that week.
Yep.
And like I obviously record on the Tuesday night because I do it live on the show.
Yep.
And then because I use all the facilities in the studio in there,
excellent.
I get good quality out of it.
Yep.
So being a teacher, I gives me enough time to cut it back and put my intro music and stick it on the web.
Yep, that's good. And do you have a website running?
I don't have a website running. That's probably going to be my next thing. I've got a Facebook page. I'm converting my Instagram to that. Well, I have converted it to that. But that's the next step to get my website running, and I want to start doing some reviews. And
cool.
I really want to get out there and just contact car manufacturers. Look, I'm interested.
Yeah, cool.
So that's my next step.
Yep.
I just want to say a big thanks to Paul Maric for the interview and for showing me where he works and giving me a good insight into the life of an automotive journalist. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we record on every week. So check out our Facebook page, CarTorque with Matty J. That's TORQUE. Give it a like, give it a share. We have the link to our Shout Engine page on there, which is where we house our podcast. If you prefer to listen to your podcast on iTunes, we're on there too. So subscribe, rate, and review so we can reach a further audience. We're also on a whole bunch of other podcasting sites, so wherever you like to see your podcast, we should be on there. Stay tuned to our Facebook page as we always have different announcements, as well as our new website in the works, which will be going live very soon. If you have any questions or want to feature on our podcast, send me a message through our Facebook page, and I'll get back to you. Until then, this has been CarTorque with Matty J. Take it easy.
This is professional radio, gentlemen.
And it's front-wheel drive.
Scotty, have you got anyone you want to thank?
Just myself.
And now we do the after hours. Dun, dun, dun.
Gentlemen, what would you go for?
ACSN there.
Okay, and because it's not a supercar.
But it is.
It's not.
Automotive perfection comes in the form of two letters, A and U.
Long live my LTD.